Okay guys, let's start with the track breakdown of a song called Let 'Em Fall. This is a pop disco track. I really love. This mixes classical disco elements, funk and soul elements with modern pop music, and that you get an idea of how this track sounds like. So let me quickly play the final chorus for you. Yeah, you get an idea, right? So what you already can maybe hear and what you definitely can see is that a lot is going on regarding instruments. So this is a very complex track in terms of production and also mixing. And I show you in a second why that is and how I arranged these kind of tracks and what my thoughts were when I produced this track. So I divide this breakdown into two videos. So if you're watching this on Instagram or TikTok, you see a couple of short videos, different parts. If you're watching this on YouTube, you see longer videos, and I'm breaking that down into two YouTube videos. The first is about production and the second is about mixing. But I also talk a little bit about mixing in the first part. How did I start with such a track and how did I come up with the ideas? First of all, to give you an idea of the complexity of the track, I show you what's there. So there's a drum set there with different drum parts and all the different parts of a drum set. There are different percussion elements. There are different bass lines. So I use different bass sounds from short phrasing, long phrasing, slapping. I use different electric guitars on the track. And you saw I grouped it already. I use different acoustic guitars on the track, some electric pianos from Rhodes to Wurlitzer. Always hard for me to pronounce Wurlitzer in English as a German guy. And I use some acoustic pianos here. I use some synthesizers, different synthesizers. I use some string sections from violin runs, violin falls, strings, complete orchestra. And we have a lot of vocal tracks here as well. So lead vocals, harmonies, ad-libs, overdubs, etc., etc. How did I start with the production of this track? So usually I start with playing a melody on guitar because I'm a guitar player. In this case, it was different. I started on the electric piano. I had a chord progression in mind I wanted to play on the piano. And I had already in mind that I want to create a kind of classical disco track, so I needed a 4 on the floor beat, but I want to use modern elements as well. I started playing on the piano and started playing the idea. So that's basically the chord progression of the verse. And as I said, I wanted to have a really nice, hard 4 on the floor disco beat. And that's why I added this and added the drums like that. I really love some funky guitars in that. So I grabbed my guitar and played these funky chords. Before I show you the other instruments, what I'd like to add is I always also think about, when I start my productions, I think about, okay, how can I create a balanced song, a balanced sound? And a balanced sound in a great production for me is really making sure that I have a nice drum set and really nice drum sound, because the rhythm is what really moves you. I really needed nice bass combined with the drums. And next thing I'm going to think about always is what can I do in the mid-range, because every great track, every great song from my point of view has just these key elements: the nice rhythm, great bass line, very well organized midsection, and a higher section, which is usually reserved for the vocals. But you also can have different instruments like flutes or stuff like that. But yeah, that's what I really need for a balanced track. So making sure that I have nice instruments in every frequency range and that it is balanced out. I talked about the bass. So the bass line in a pop disco track is very crucial as well. What was important for me is that I wanted to have like a sound more like this classical Beatles bass, so Höfner 501 bass sound, and that's why I added this bass line with this very short plectrum picked bass chords. Well, this is already the basis for the verse, but no disco track without great violins and strings and violin runs and violin faults. So I'm using for violins, especially for disco, I'm using a plugin called Sound Paint, which is very great for that. I didn't have this for this track. I'm using Sound Paint today, but when I finished the track beginning of the year, I didn't have this. So I asked a friend of mine. I can also play violin myself, but I didn't play violin for, 10 years or so. So there was not a good idea to use my violin playing for the song. So I asked a friend of mine, also helping me with the arrangement of the violin. I wanted to have a really nice run. So these runs, from the disco tracks, and I show you what I mean with that. And no run without faults. So I wanted to have violin faults as well directly after that. So how that sounds is that. Yeah, so that's basically the verse. Then I tried to open it up in the pre-chorus a little bit. So that's with the string section you heard. And then in the chorus section, and let me just quickly open the arrangement that I can see it. So this is the verse. In the chorus section, I really used further instruments, further guitars, synth. So I always try to make the track and the song interesting for the listener. So that means that I don't use the same instruments in every part. That's a very important thing to look at when you're arranging a song, that you keep the listener engaged, and that just, even if it's subconsciously, right? And the listener cannot tell you, okay, what's changing between verse 1 and verse 2, or what's changing between the verse and the chorus from the instrumentation, but they feel it because there is definitely different instruments coming in, or it's just more powerful in the chorus. It opens up in the chorus, and that's what I did it as well. So when you hear the chorus with all the instruments, let me just play the chorus for you. Let's just also use the vocals. What you also can hear is that the second verse is then opening up a little bit more than the first verse. The first verse is really reduced to electric piano, a little bit of strings, drums, the bass, and the vocals, and percussion. I've been counting clouds, tracing lines in the sky. When you compare that to the second verse, so I'm stepping out where the lights burning low. So you you have additional strings, you have an additional piano coming in. So I used an acoustic piano in addition to the electric piano and really open it up. What's also important for me when I think about arrangement and production is that each part has space to breathe, right? So in the different frequency spaces. So for example, I had a little interlude in the song after the second chorus where I just wanted to be the guitar, the star of this part. And that's why I reduced everything else really to the basics like drums and bass and a little bit of strings and vocal ad-libs. But that's it. And just give the guitar time to breathe. So in this part, the guitar is the star, where, for example, the bass is the star in another part. Right, we realize now when the bridge comes, so now further instruments coming in, but the interlude is really reserved for the guitar. This is the hero in this section. And then I open it up in the bridge and just, also open it up for the chorus later on. So when you hear the bridge, so I do the bridge and open it up a little bit, and then going a little bit, going a little bit down, make it a little bit more quiet in the pre-chorus, but then to directly open it up starting with violin runs, starting with the whole orchestra, and going into the final chorus. So that makes an arrangement really interesting, that you don't have all the instruments playing in all the parts, and that's a mistake I'm seeing very often when beginners just start producing, that they play the piano and they think, okay, this is the piano part for the verse and this piano part needs to be there the whole song, but that's not the case. And if you listen to professional productions on the radio or on Spotify or other streaming services, you really hear that there is this really balance, and you have different instruments playing in different parts. That makes it very interesting. Another thing that makes it interesting is not only the arrangement of the instruments and the different use of the instruments, it's also how the instruments are placed in the stereo field. And that's what I did here as well. So I really made sure that I have not just one guitar or not just one piano. I made sure that I have different pianos that I can bring in from the right side or the left side into the stereo field. When you listen to older records from the 70s, the 60s, 70s, or 80s, you realize pretty much that if you just pan on your speakers, for example, if you have stereo speakers, if you pan something to the left or the right, you just can hear sometimes just one specific instrument, right? You can only hear the guitar, but you can't hear the piano. That helped me a lot when I learned guitar, because what I did in the early days is just I panned the track with the original track with the singer and everything, just panned to the left, and I just heard the piano and I could play the guitar as an early form of a backing track. But in a modern production, I really love it when I have a really stereo sound and using the whole stereo field. Why I usually also, when I play guitar, for example, I record different guitars and with different pickup settings as well, and pan them to different directions. So I have really nice stereo guitar sound and also not the same sound. So you should also avoid that to, let's say, playing the guitar with the same pickup setting, playing the same guitar part twice with the same setting. That causes phasing issues and it doesn't sound great. So, and you also barely hear a difference. So that's important, that you really also use different settings for your guitar or piano, or use different pianos when you want to create that really nice and round stereo sound. When I do automations, and that's the next thing I do to make a song more interesting, is I work a lot with automations. And you can see that here, I just make a little bit smaller. and you can see that a lot of automations are going on here. You can really make a track very interesting with that. First of all, sometimes automations are really necessary to balance out gain, for example, between the gain levels between different parts. Or let's say when just the instrumentation is more full and you have a lot of instruments going on in the background, I use also gain levels to maybe make the vocals a little bit louder and do really a vocal ride and make sure that the vocals sit in front of the instruments and really sit in the middle. So there it is necessary, but I also do it for the instruments. You see, I did some gain changes here for the guitar. And that's another mistake I'm seeing frequently from other producers, is that they use, and I can speak here for Logic, but it's similar in other DAWs as well, that they use the volume control to make the automation. The problem is when you use the volume control for automations is that you cannot change the volume in the mix later on because it's automated. So it doesn't work. It will always go back to the last volume level you set up in the automation. I play with an additional gain plugin, so that gives me the possibility to have these rides and make it louder and make it more quiet. But it also gives me the possibility later on in the mixing stage to adjust the volume, but don't change the gain at all. So I can make the guitar in general a little bit quieter, more quiet, or a little bit more louder, but I don't change my different gain settings and my volumes in the different areas. And I also use a lot of automations, not only for gain, but I use it for panning as well. So maybe starting in the verse with just one instrument sitting in the middle and then open it up later on in the pre-chorus or chorus, make it more wider when I add additional piano or additional guitar, and then I pan it to the left or to the right and play with that really. In EDM or in more electronic music, I also produce as well. So I use these automations and panning also as an effect, but in this kind of more traditional classic disco pop track, I don't need this kind of panning between left and right frequently. I just use it to balance out the instruments in the stereo field and in the frequency spectrum. I use automations as well for vocals a lot. As you can see here, what I did here for the vocals, for example, I used gain as well to balance out, because I use so many instruments. In some parts, strings coming in, then strings go away again, then guitars coming in, going away. So this makes it very hard to balance out the vocals. So, but it's very crucial for me that there is a continuous, that for the listener sounds very, very cool, and there are no hard changes in volume, right? Where everybody just sits there and thinks, okay, what's happening now? The vocals are suddenly very loud. So, and even if people cannot tell you, they can feel it. And you see that I did a lot of changes in the gain as well, in the vocals, in the lead vocals especially, make sure that the vocals really always sit on top of the whole instrumentation. And I use automations for effects. So I usually send my effects to a separate sense channel, like delay and reverb. And that's what I did for vocals as well. So let me show you quickly an example here. Yeah, so I played a little bit with effects, with delay and reverb in this song, but not too much. You usually have a lot of more stuff going on here in electronic dance music, where you play a lot with this stuff. But yeah, I use it and really use automation to create a very nice effect, or also to, if the singer sings something very special or a special phrase, or there is just one part where, it really makes sense to repeat it with a delay, I do it. Yeah, so that's really how I did this track. In the next part, I'm going to talk more about mixing. Before we go into this, I can already talk about the plugins I used in this track. A lot of people always ask about the vocal chain. So that really depends as well on the song. So for this song, I really kept it very simple, to be honest. What I did here, for example, for the lead vocals is, I already talked about that. I use a gain plugin to make sure that I don't mess up with the volume button. I, for sure, used EQing to eliminate all the frequency spectrum that I don't need. I used Soothe and Sibilance. Sibilance is a Waves plugin, Soothe for de-essing. I used a vocal writer from Waves to help me balancing out the levels of the gain of the vocals, but I also did manual changes in gain as well. And I used a plugin called Vocal or Voice Centric. That's from Greg Wells. And what this plugin is doing is already giving the vocals a nice basic reverb and adding a little bit of compression to the vocals. And that gives already a very nice sound. I added Sense, and through this Sense, I'm playing around with the effects. So reverb and delay that you heard already earlier. That's how this vocal chain looks like in this case. In some songs, I really do my vocal chain more manually. That means gain, preamp sometimes when I do recording, running the microphone through a preamp. Then having EQ, having some compressors as well. What I really like using as a compressor is the LA2A and the 1176. I use Soothe or Sibilance, sometimes also using the built-in de-esser that is built in Logic. And I use Vocal Write sometimes, or the Greg Wells plugin as well. That's it basically. So I don't do very much with the vocals, but it also really depends on the singer, right? And what kind of singer you have. And sometimes you have to do more, sometimes you have to do less. In this case, I really received already well recorded vocals, so that's a very important thing as well to mention. Make sure that your vocals are already very well recorded and you don't have so much to do, to be honest, and don't have to mess up with a lot of plugins and stuff later on if you have really well recorded vocals already. So half of the job is already done in the recording. If you have well recorded instruments and vocals, you don't have to do much later on. So that's it for the production part. I hope that was insightful. Well, maybe two things I want to add is that maybe you realize that I use chords. I do that almost every time, adding the chords to my project. That really helps me when I record something. Maybe I record guitar, I play piano already, record the guitar. Just first of all, to see the chords and see when the chord changes are coming, what I have to play next. But also if I'm working with session musicians, that really helps them to really see the chords directly and can play and record directly without just having additional sheets, paper lying around, stuff like that. And I'll also add the arrangement very early when I know how the song is going. I add the arrangement. So this gives the project a really nice structure, and it also helps the mixing engineer if a mixing engineer is coming in later on. In this case, I mix the track by myself, so but sometimes I also send tracks and it's mixed by other mixing engineers. So they really appreciate it if they get the color coding and the nice organization of the song already. Yeah. If you have any questions, just leave a comment or leave your question. I try to answer it, and I hope this breakdown was helpful for you to see how you can produce a more complex track with different instruments and what is important when it comes to arrangement. That's what we talked about. We talked about how important it is to have a balanced frequency areas so that you have instruments sitting in each area. So the bass, the drums, the mids, the higher sections with vocals and other instruments maybe. And if you have any questions, just let me know and have fun.